All right, so welcome everyone. This is an AMA session with me. Hopefully, that's what you signed up for. Again, just while we get started, I'm kind of curious to hear a little bit of how you're feeling about college apps right now. I know some of you might be seniors applying to college right now, some of you might be a few years out from that. So, in the chat, write in the emoji that best represents how you're feeling about college apps right now, just to kind of get a sense of how you're feeling about it. You can do that. There's a bit of a there's like a little emoji picker on the screen, or you can do a custom one if you double click and click the emoji symbols. No one's having any feelings about college apps right now. Where to start? It's hard to choose one emoji. You can choose multiple. Kind of lost, a bit worried about essays. Yeah, I mean, it's gonna be a very confusing process, even if it's laid out. It's tough, especially when you don't have a lot of that one-on-one support to answer all of the million tiny questions that come up throughout this process. Um, I will say, if you're worried about essays, I did, depending on where you're at, I did lead a workshop on helping you ideate and create an outline for sessions. I can follow up after the session with the link to that. I believe it's still available for free on YouTube, so hopefully that'll be something to get you started. And of course, I'll talk at the end about how you can get additional support. All right. So let's just keep going then. So because we're started, just a bit of an intro on who I am and my background, and then I'll share some guidelines for the Q&A, and then we'll just dive right in to make sure that the session is just focused on your questions. All right. So, hi everyone. I am Isamar. I am a former assistant director of admissions at Stanford. I was there for 4 years. I worked with both a U.S. Portfolio and also an international portfolio. So, really got a lot of good insights into what competitive applicants look like across the world, across different regions, and even beyond my own portfolio. Of course, as member of admissions committees, where I got to see my colleagues as portfolios from other regions. So that was really great insight to understand like what it takes to get into not just Stanford, but really highly selective institutions all over the country. Um, but beyond that, it also was really good training understanding how well crafted applications are put together. Who because a lot of it isn't just about who's a good fit for Stanford. It's also about who's able to really do a good job of explaining their interests, what they're excited about writing about it in a very interesting way. And that was a really good insight into what the end product looks like. Of course, I also worked with a top admissions company or admissions consulting company afterwards, where I worked on the other end, right? So helping students who were at the beginning of their journey, whether it was last minute they were last minute working on their applications as seniors, or they were a few years out from applying, so we had time to build up their profile, help them identify their interests, and elevate their activities and their pursuits to a higher level, and then finally find a way to bring it all together and make it all make sense, but still have their voice and their like authentic interests come through in their application. So really have experience on both ends of the admissions process. My backgrounds: I went to Harvard for undergrad and for my master's degree, and then I went to Oxford for an MBA. Really, what this means is I really like school. I've been through the admissions process myself several times. I didn't actually get much help, so I know how much of a difference it would have made if I had had that one-on-one support. I think the thing that is most important to me is I very much care about taking an approach is very focused on the student. So it's a student-led approach. I, of course, will be very direct in the way that I work with students and bringing in what I know about this process. But I'm not prescriptive in the sense that I very much believe that, the strongest applications are those where a student has very genuine interests, where they're very unique and they do their own thing, and they just do that in a way that is very very thorough. They go deep into what they're interested in. They explore what they're curious about. And sometimes it doesn't work, and that's okay. And they realize, they learn more from it. And so that's really my approach. You can see from my psych and education background, I very much focus. I recognize that students are. You're in high school, you're still learning, you're still trying to figure out what you're interested in. And even by the time you apply, you might still not know. But I really try and help the student like highlight like focus in on what it is that they're excited about and what they could potentially learn, and always also self-paced, right? Students grow at different levels. They have different strengths, that they have different characteristics that they're working on, and so that's really how a student gets through this process successfully, is if it's very much led by their interests and goes at their own pace. So just a couple of disclaimers for this session. So this does focus on undergraduate admissions. If you're here to get information on graduate admissions processes, this is not the session for you. I did go through graduate admissions processes myself, but again, my focus is really on helping students who are applying to undergraduate colleges for the first time. There are certain details about the admissions process that are confidential. Um, Granted, given all the lawsuits, there's a lot of information you can get out there. But that's just something I do have to say, that there's certain particulars that I do have to keep to myself. That being said, I will be as straightforward as I can be. And if there's something that I can't share because of those reasons, I will let you know. But really, almost anything goes. Applicability varies. So every student's experience can be very different. So as much as I'm hoping that a lot of these questions and responses will be applicable to everyone. Not everything will be. So it's okay if something doesn't fit your situation exactly. There's no guarantee of results with any advice that I provide. Again, this is a very there's an art and a science to this process. Um, a lot of what I provide is recommended strategies and advice based on my expertise. But of course, anybody who works in admissions, and who tries to do so ethically will know that they can't guarantee any sort of results. All right, so we're gonna move on to the Q&A. Before I share the link again, just a couple of guidelines. So one is, if you're willing to ask live, I'll prioritize your question. And this is just so that you are not looking at me the whole time, and you can get a different voice in the virtual room. So if that is the case, include your name in the question box. Don't submit anonymously, and I'll look for those first. Anonymous questions are okay. You don't have to ask live. I'll still get to those. It's okay if you're not comfortable with being live asking your question. Make sure you keep the questions concise, keep them on topic. Try not to have tons of different questions. This is so that, again, it'll be easier for students to upvote if there's like one in the several questions that you include. It won't be clear which is the one that they wanted most to have answered. With that being said, keep one question per box, but you can ask as many questions as you like. Make sure you upvote your favorite questions. Again, this helps me know what you care about the most. I know that there's already some questions on there, so while you guys log on, I'll give you a couple minutes to type in your question and to go look through what's already been said, so we can get started with the ones you're most excited about. This is not a Stanford specific session, and I realize that might have not been clear based on my background. I, of course, will weave in my experience as a former AO there. And also because a lot of that has helped me as a coach as well. But this is not meant to give you, to just talk about Stanford. A lot of what a lot of the advice that I can give applies to not just Stanford institutions. Oh, I'm not sure what happened with the video. Um, let's see. Can you give me a thumbs up if you see a video of me and a thumbs down if you don't? Thumbs down. Okay, let me try. Okay, so some of you see me, some of you don't. Let me try restarting the screen share again. Oh, okay. I think it should be fine. Sorry about that. Okay. So then, and again, ask any questions, no matter how small they seem. You don't know if somebody else might have the same question. Everybody's going to be at different places in the journey. So there's many of you who might not have had exposure to all the different concepts and ideas and advice that is out there about admission. So please ask the questions that have been top of mind. And above all, just be respectful of other people's questions, of me as a speaker. We're all just, humans. We're here to help each other. We're here to support each other. So just be respectful in your questions and your responses. Okay. So let me do. Okay. So that being said, here is the QR code for the Slido again. If a few of you might have seen my message that I sent, where you could already submit your question. So you can just scan this QR code, or you can just go to slido.com directly and put in this code right here, and that'll allow you to submit your questions. I'm gonna leave this up for a bit, and then I'm going to transfer over to the Slido so I can start seeing what questions everybody is asking. And let me know if any of you are having issues with accessing it. Okay, so I see that there's a few questions coming in. And remember to upvote the ones or like the ones that that you really want to have answered. Okay, I'll give you a couple more minutes to submit questions, and maybe some of them will come up as we go along. And then just in case, I'm going to add in the chat the code again. All right. Okay. So feel free to keep adding it, and then I'm gonna just switch to this screen instead, and you'll see the QR code and the regular code to log in. Okay, just give me a thumbs up if you're able to see the new Slido. It looks like it's appearing, so it should be fine. Okay, so I don't have any folks who want to do this who shared their name yet, unless if Brittany, you want to ask your question. I don't know if you've joined. Okay, I don't see any initials here with the B, so I imagine Brittany is not here. Okay, so Brittany is asking, as a prospective international student from Ecuador, what's one quality Stanford values most in applicants? So I'm assuming most in applicants is international students. So I'll answer both for applicants as a whole and international applicants. So one for Stanford, they really do value interdisciplinary thinking, interdisciplinary interests. I think sometimes, and this is not just for Stanford, but just for any university, sometimes they become known for one particular thing, like this is an engineering school, this is an art school. But if you notice that they have tons of different majors, right? It's not just it's not that just Stanford just has engineering, or that, um, you know, um, like Columbia just has, you know, political programs or classics or whatever. They have a robust program, and they want students who are going to be interested in engaging with the different academic programs that they offer, and also non-academic as well, so like extracurricular programs. So I think that that's something that that they really values when they recognize that somebody, yes, they might be focused on a particular subject area, but they also recognize the value of learning from the other different fields that they have to offer, whether it's through an official general education type program, or whether it's just through their intentions for doing minors or for taking electives. Like, it really also helps the application come alive, and shows how you might be able to see connections between different fields. So I think that's something that they value. Well, Stanford particular values from applicants, but I would say a lot of universities will value that as well. In terms of international applicants, I mean, it's really going to be a lot of what they look at for their domestic applicants. I think one thing that is interesting that might be a little bit different to keep in mind for international applicants is that oftentimes there's the idea of, um, is this student one of the best in the whole country, right? Which is, I think, a bit of a different challenge from US based students, which they often look at in their context of their high school, their city, their state, their region. Obviously, that is also taken into consideration for international applicants, but there is sometimes a little bit of that idea of, is this one of the top students that's a good fit for our university from that particular country, which adds a little pressure, to be honest. But I said I was going to try and be very straightforward, but that is often a lot of times the thinking that takes place in admissions offices. And that doesn't necessarily mean that you have to have, national level awards or anything, but just keep in mind that that is something that they're thinking of really who's submitting the best application, that's the best, that's a really good fit for a school from that particular country. Okay, next one. I'm not seeing you guys like any, so so if I'm only seeing these six, we might be finished with this hour very quickly. Okay, so next question is, what are some ways to showcase creativity to schools that do not accept portfolios? That is a really good question. So first is really through the essays. The essays, because of their writing, they're not going to be traditional academic essays. You can be creative with them, and oftentimes, students can submit really strong applications with more traditional narrative, like personal essays. But there's some really great applications that I remember that or where the student just took a really creative approach to it, where I remember seeing one that was like an essay that was sort of structured as a play. And granted, this makes sense for the student because they were interested in like theater and performance arts. I've seen poems. I've seen like vignette style essays where they do kind of like mini anecdotes weave throughout. I've seen just some that have really, stellar writing where they just they're very thoughtful in their use of words and it's creative in that sense. So that is really one of the best ways to do it. The other is through really just through your activities. Your activities have the potential to show your creativity, either through being involved in activities that are different or less common. So that's a form of being creative. Or if you have just more, traditionally creative interests, that's how that's going to emerge. So if you're interested in any sort of arts or writing or anything like that, that's a way to show it. But also remember, creativity isn't just about more artistic type creativity. It can just be being creative in the way that you think or solve problems or put things together. And again, that I think could come through by, your choice of doing activities. So for example, like oftentimes see this with students who are interested in business, right? Where they might come up with a very creative business to solve a local problem, whether it's something like let's say let's say maybe somebody wants to express their creativity through selling let's say like cartoons of seniors for them to post in their yearbook. It could be anything anything really different, really random, really like interesting. Or sometimes it might just be like, let's say, um, somebody realizes that a lot of the seniors don't want to take the bus, but they don't have cars, so they decide to basically be a high school Uber where they'll charge their friends a few bucks to drive them to school in the morning so they don't have to walk in the cold, right? And that could be a form of being creative in by solving a problem, right? That might seem as minor, but that's a way of showing that creativity as well. Let's see. How can I approach international community service differently to stand out and show my commitment? Um, I'm not sure if this means community service as international applicant or community service internationally, like something that's more of a like a service trip. I will say I'll just take this a bit higher in terms of um, community service as a whole. So one thing that I'll say that's probably a bit of a hot take is like you don't need to do community service to apply to college. Um, I think sometimes I see a lots of students who will do community service either because it's a requirement for their high school or because they think they have to for college. But oftentimes it can end up coming across as just like a checklist activity. So something that they do just to add it to their application. And it can be very obvious when it's that because it's not consistent. Like they're not committed to that particular um like organization or mission that they're supporting over a long period of time, or it's very light in terms of their time commitment to it, and it's very just like passive in the way that they approach it. And so oftentimes I'll say, like, honestly, when I see those applications, like I forget that the student does community service because it doesn't emerge as something that is a big part, that is something that they're really interested in or that they care about. And oftentimes it might be that I remember other parts of it. There are other parts of their activity profile that I could tell if they care about most, and that is okay. And that is okay. And honestly, I think a lot of AOs might say that, or just people in general would say that it's better if you're doing going to do community service, you do it for something that you care about and that you're going to be able to help and support and be consistent with over a long period of time. And that's better than than just kind of doing the random things. Granted, I'm sure any service organization that's supporting will love your help as you need it. But for the purposes of the application, I would say like if that is something that you care about, like it has to be something that you show that commitment to over a long period of time. That you do something substantial for it, and sometimes it might start off with you just helping like any other volunteer with like simple tasks. But if you're there over time, like are there opportunities that you can look out for or that you can request for you to contribute in bigger ways? For example, it might be that you start off working, let's say, at a shelter, and you're helping unbox canned food, and you do that consistently, and maybe over time you can start serving food, and maybe over time you realize that you want to help more of the fundraising, so you start maybe helping create a social media campaign to get more attention to any sort of fundraising campaigns. Maybe you can start creating proposals to the team on how to get more attention from potential big picture donors, right? And that's the thing with any activity. Actually, it's like it takes time to build that impact that will be quote unquote impressive for admission officers, but also more meaningful to you, right? And that's also how you can grow, right? Because it's building skills as well and learning more about the organization and the issues that they face, in resolving a major cause. So just to kind of summarize this, I think that the real way to stand out with community service is to identify a cause that you really care about and you want to learn more about how to address. Start supporting it in any way that you can, being consistent with it, and then look for opportunities to contribute more to the organization and to resolving the mission. And you won't know what those will be. It will only come with time, and as you also get more trust from the leaders of whatever organization you're serving as well. The other thing I will say is you don't have to serve through an official organization. You can always start your own initiative. Um, what I will say is sometimes it's easier to get that experience and that confidence by starting with an organization itself before you start your own initiative. See, um, do you have? Let me just make sure I'm answering. Marketing is answered. Okay, what is the best way to present the classes I am taking that are not listed on my high school transcript? So the best way is on the application directly. Well, there's a couple of ways. One is if you're using the Common App, the additional information section is where you can add in everything that doesn't fit in elsewhere. So that's where you can just include a section where you title it, additional coursework, and you list what the courses were, whether they were dual enrollment or you took them online through Coursera or any other sort of online course provider. If you received a grade for it, also include that. If it was a class that you took, let's say through like a summer program, you can include that as well. Oftentimes you'll be asked in the education section whether you took any courses for credit elsewhere. So that could be at a community college or through again a summer program. So you can list institutions there. You just won't be able to list the names of the courses. So that's how you'll be able to do that in the additional information section. If you have space, you can also include them in the activities list. So let's say if you took courses for fun, let's say you took I don't know, like an advanced physics courses just to go beyond your school's curriculum. You could have one of your activities list entry titled, independent physics students courses on Coursera and edX and what have you, and then description describe like what the courses were. The other thing is you can ask your counselor when they're writing their letter for you to include those courses as well. They can even explain if they were not for credit or you couldn't receive school credit for it. They can also address why your school has issues about maybe your school doesn't offer dual enrollment, so you took these top courses on your own, but they don't count as high school credit. So that's another way. So again, different ways. But the one that you have the most control over is just putting it in the additional information section. Let's see. What are the biggest errors or mistakes you see, or what pitfalls should we avoid? Hmm. Let me think through this one. Well, let's see. In terms of the biggest ones, one is really identifying a school that is a good fit for you, and fit is it's among different aspects. So one is whether it's an academic fit in terms of your interest. So like if sometimes I'll have students tell me, oh, I really want to study business and I want to go to Stanford or Harvard, and I have to tell them, well, they don't have a business major. Like if that's really what you could learn that, but it's all going to be outside of the classroom because for the undergraduate programs, that's just not something that exists. So that's important. Like be mindful of if you're really focused on a specific area of study you want to pursue, don't throw that away just because you're attracted to the brand of a particular school. So, and ultimately, if it comes across in your application that you're interested in a specific path that the school doesn't offer, even if you have a strong application, a university might not admit you because of that, because they see that you're not a good fit for what they have to offer. Um, Another is I think sometimes, oh, this is a big one. Oftentimes students focus so much on the personal essay, which as they should. It's a very important key part of your application. But I think sometimes the same level of thought and um, and editing and iterations are not given to the supplement essays. So what sometimes will happen is I'll see an application that seems really strong, and then I could tell that the supplement essays were just very rushed, or they didn't have the same high level of writing that I would see in the personal essay. And so it ends up, you know, if you think of it, it ends up making the application kind of fall flat towards the end, right? Or they're not using that space to share different sides of them. You can talk about the same topics, but it has to be from different perspectives across the different essays or short answer questions that you might have. So that's something to keep in mind, because again, like those supplement essays really matter just as much as a personal essay as well. So I think those are the two big ones that I see, that are a little bit more strategic, right? They're not going to be just tiny little things like, oh, you missed, you misspelled things, right? Like that's a really minor thing that can be overlooked as a typo. But these kind of really big picture strategic um, issues are the ones that you have to focus on. Let's see. Do you have any advice on how to determine reach versus backup schools? Yeah, there's a few different ways to approach it. I think so. The first one I think most students are familiar with is just looking at selectivity. So the admit rates for each school. So I would say generally, anything less than a 20% admit rate for a school is considered a reach. Anything less than maybe 10 or 15% is an ultra reach school. I say target could be anywhere between 20-25% and 50%. So those that you have sort of a 50-50-ish chance to get in. And then safety schools are generally anything that's 50% and above. So that's one way, and I think the way that most people take an approach to it. Um, there's also a different approach, which again goes back to fit, right? So for example, like we talk about the UCs, right? The UC University of California system, which has lots of different schools, has become more competitive, but different ones of their campuses have different levels of competitiveness. So for one student who's maybe, in top 3% of their class, or their high school class at that school, in California, for them, UCs are going to be probably a safety, because the UC has a system where they guarantee admission as long as you apply to the school to students at like a really top level of their class. It's sort of like a more streamlined approach. They still have to apply, and it might not necessarily be that they know exactly which one that they're going to get in, but given that system and that student's academic portfolio or academic profile, for them, a UC would probably be a safety, right? But for another student who's maybe top 10%, right? So, you have a pretty good academic profile, but then it's just a matter of, how well they craft together their essays and explain their activities and all of that. For them, it might be more of a target. So they might get into, some of their UC applications or some of their UC schools, but not all of them. And then there's going to be other students for whom it will just be really a reach, because of how competitive it is. So that's what I mean. Like you see, for certain schools, for certain students, depending on the student's background, for some it's going to be a safety, which might be surprising to some students. But for others, it's going to be, a target or reach. So it's really more about like what your profile looks like. So I would say that ultra reach schools are going to be ultra reach for anybody, just because of how selective it is. Similar to reach schools, but schools like target schools might be, safeties for some students, but they might be reach for others, depending on what your academic background looks like. So if let's say your average grade point average, or test scores are like within range of the scores of admitted students to a particular school, it might be a target. And if you're below that, it's probably going to be a reach. But again, it's hard to determine just based on those GPA ranges, because even those, like, every school will calculate GPAs differently. And by that I mean every high school and also every university. And again, it's not just based on your academics, right? It's based on your essays and your letters and your activities profile. So that's only a very minor way to approach it. But if you need something just to start defining, which ones you might want to apply to and which ones you might not want to, or just try cutting down your college list, that's just one way to approach that. Let's see. I'm an international freshman studying at a college in the US, aiming to transfer to Stanford for sophomore year. What's your best advice for my situation? Um, by the way, I mentioned this wasn't going to be just a Stanford specific session, but I will answer this just because it's very brief. Um, Honestly, I would say wait till you're a sophomore. The strongest applications for transfers will probably come from students who are in their second year of university, because that means that gives you time to make sure that really don't think your current college is a fit, and that's something that Stanford's probably going to be looking for. They want to see that you have a good reason for wanting to transfer out of your school, and why Stanford is a better fit than where you're currently at, especially if you are, you know, already quote unquote well placed at your college. So I would just give yourself that time to really try to make the most of the current college that you're at, of the current college that you're studying at. Because you also don't know what's going to happen with the transfer. So you want to make the most of where you might be still studying for, for 4 years. Do well in your classes. Get to know your professors, because remember, you're going to have professors write letters for you. And they'll help be able to vouch for your reasons for transferring if you find that you still want to do that. Just remember, it's even more competitive than it is for undergraduate admissions because there's such few transfer slots. So the best thing you can do is give yourself time to strengthen your profile, and to think through, like, what is the really thoughtful reason of why you need to leave your current college. And sometimes that means for certain students, that they realize they want to focus on something very specific that their school just doesn't offer academically. They don't have the resources, they don't have the major, they don't have professors with expertise in that area. Those often tend to be the more thoughtful reasons to help make your case. See, since Stanford is a research university, will they be less interested in accepting humanities students, specifically government and policy? Okay, so I'm going to bring this back to the question that I answered earlier. So again, about universities as a whole, where you have to remember that every school isn't just focused on one particular thing. So Stanford is a research university, like many other selective universities across the country. It's also a liberal arts university. And research isn't just science research. Research is also conducted in the humanities, in the social sciences. So any school that's a research university that offers a liberal arts program, it's gonna have professors who conduct research across all of their different subjects. So that's something that you shouldn't have to be worried about. In terms of, when you're looking at universities that do offer research, for the most part, if they have, unless if it's a school that's, let's say, like a tech school or school that very much just tends to offer like engineering, or like Babson tends to focus on business, right? Like those obviously are going to be more focused on those particular areas. But for the most part, if it's a liberal arts institution, that means that they have professors who are teaching across all the different subject areas, who are most likely conducting research or leading research institutes or centers across those different areas. So yeah, that's not something that I think you should worry about. And for the most part, if the school is liberal arts, they're going to be looking for those students who are going to be filling up all of their different majors. Let's see. What do admissions committees value most in transfer applicants? I mean, it's the same as for undergraduates. They're going to be looking for a student who's shows a strong academic fit for their university. They're going to be prepared for whatever their standard of academics are. They're going to be looking for students who are going to contribute to the university, and that's going to be clear through their academics. And especially because you're going to be a college student, they're going to be looking to see that you already were making an effort to be truly engaged and contributing to your current campus community. They're going to be looking for what is your reason for transferring, right? And it's going to be different depending on where you're transferring from. So for students who are transferring from community college, they have to transfer because they have to go to a four-year university, right, to be able to finish their undergraduate education. Oftentimes there's going to be a little bit, especially at most selective universities, there's going to be a little bit of more of a bias towards admitting these community college students. But again, it's different for larger state institutions. They're going to be admitting a lot from from everywhere. That being said, the big thing is like making sure you have more academic maturity than the freshman applicants, right? Because you will have had 1 or 2 years of college, and they're gonna look for a really thoughtful reason for why you're transferring. That and it's usually has to be that your current university just doesn't offer what you're looking to study, especially in your final years of college. So it's just being very thoughtful about why you want to leave your current school and why this other one you're applying to is going to be a better fit for you. See, does Stanford prefer concise essays or flexibility in the writing style? Okay, I'm going to make this broadly about universities in general. Um, I mean, I think all your essays need to be concise in the sense that you shouldn't be rambling. So you have limited space, so you want to make sure that every sentence deserves to be there. And it really is when you get to the point where you start finalizing and polishing your essays, it's going line by line and saying, are you being repetitive with what you're saying in each essay? Does the sentence belong here? Is it moving the story forward? Is it showing some helpful context to explain your story? Or are you sharing some different insight into who you are, how you've grown, or what you think? So every you should be concise. That means you can use up all the space that you have. But let me let me make this answer a little bit more concise. You can use up all the space that you're given for an essay. That is completely fine. So if you're given 650 for a personal essay, 650 words, you can use those 650 words. It's fine. You don't have to feel like you need to cut it down to 500, 550. But it's everything that's in those 650 words needs to belong there. There needs to be a reason why it's there. And your story itself shouldn't sound like you're rambling. That also doesn't mean that you have to fill out the 650 words. If you can tell everything that you want to say in less than that, that's also okay. I'm not sure what you mean by flexibility in the writing style. Yes, like as I said earlier, you can be creative in your approach. And you can write a more traditional, personal narrative, and that's fine. And there's excellent most essays are like that, and there's most admins will have sort of a more traditional, storytelling format weaved in with some personal reflection. But you can take an approach where you're more creative and you either want to include more dialogue or you want to kind of zoom into the story and zoom out. You want to take more of like a poetic approach or write a different style, you can certainly do that. I think it also depends on the prompt as well. Like you want to make sure you are answering the prompt, and don't forget that for the sake of trying to be different. But for the most part, yes, there's going to be flexibility. Let's see, let me keep going to this. How can I best demonstrate my fit for Stanford? Okay, I'm going to bring this broadly to universities in general that you're applying to. Which I feel like I've covered this a little bit already. How you're going to demonstrate your fit is first of all, is in your selection process as you're researching universities that you might be interested in. Don't look at just the admissions websites. Look at the university websites as a whole. Look at their different academic departments that you're interested in. What are their majors like? What types of coursework do they offer? Who are their professors? Look at their student clubs as well. Like, what do they offer? What do they do? How engaged are they? Look at their career centers, like how successful they are, what type of support they have for the potential careers you might be interested in. Look at the student newspaper, because that gives you a sense of really what's life like on campus right now, across different dimensions. So student life, issues with the university, if it's in the news for any reason, look up all of that. Okay. So you want to first make sure that the schools that you're applying to are going to be a really good fit for you, for what the type of experience you want in college, for the areas you might be interested in studying, for how much flexibility or structure you want, in a university. So, for example, let's say you don't want really rigid requirements or tons of different, core academic requirements before you start digging um, into the classes that you actually want to take. If that is the case, like I would say, like don't apply to Columbia. Maybe Brown would be a better fit for you, right? Just because of the core, because of the way that their education um, the way that their academic experience is structured. If let's say you want a really social, very Greek life heavy experience, then I would, recommend you apply to, maybe, certain universities over others, right? Because they're just not going to offer that. So that's one thing. Just you have to research the colleges you're interested in really well, so that you can define a really good college list that makes sense for you. It has to make sense that you're applying there. Second of all, you have to make that clear through your application. So the essays that you write, you don't necessarily have to, you know, name drop a lot of um, you know, specific classes that you want to take or courses or professors. Obviously, you can do that, but it's really about showing that you have the things that you're curious about are aligned with the way that a certain school sets up their academic programs or sets up their majors that they offer. Um, that's something that you have to make sure it's clear across your academics. And even if you're not asked a specific, why are you applying to X university, that's still going to be something that's going to be evident through the other essays that you write. So when you share like what it is that you're interested in or what you're excited about or what your approach is to developing community, that's all things that they're going to be focused on. So for example, if there's a school where you know they really care about community service and that's a core value for them, that's something that they're going to be looking for their applicants, that you explain your experiences in serving others or what serving means to you. The other is through activities, right? It's easy to talk about what you value or what you care about, but your activities reflect how those values translate in your real life, because they're a reflection of how you spend your time and energy. And so that's going to be something that you have to consider, how your activities, if you're saying that you are really interested in engineering, but none of your activities, you ever explored that, or you never built, and even if you didn't have engineering teams or clubs at your school, if you never tried building anything, then that's not going to come across as you being a good fit for a university that offers engineering, when you haven't sought ways to explore that on your own. So that's something you have to keep in mind, is how can you be very thoughtful in your activities, and demonstrating like the values that you claim that you're going to have. How can you live that through your extracurriculars? Okay, and then I think this will be the last one, just because we're running out of time. If you have another one that popped up, now's the time to add that in. Okay, I'm applying for scholarships seeking serious game changers, but I'm becoming one at my high school. Even with not that big fates, can essay save me? Okay, I'm having a little bit trouble understanding this. Okay, so I'm going to. It sounds like you're saying you're applying for a scholarship that is for students who are called game changers, who have that kind of characteristic, and that you're slowly working on developing that for yourself within your school. Um, but you're not sure yet if that's going to be enough, and can your essays help? Um, it's hard for me to talk without knowing specifically what scholarship this is. Like, I don't know if this is a university scholarship or just a general private scholarship. Um, I mean, so again, essays are a way you can share. How do you think that is different, right? Like, how like, what is your game-changing mindset is what I would say. Like, what do you have to say, or what perspective do you have in the world, or what opinions you have on an issue or a problem that are gonna be interesting or different or creative or bold? That's one thing I would look at it. I think one thing to remember, and this applies to applications as a whole, is that, like, essays are just one component on the application. It really is a matter of looking at every single different piece and trying to fit them together, and what is the more, not just the sum of its parts, but more than the sum of all the pieces of the application. So that's what I'll say to that. I'm gonna have a harder time responding to that without knowing specifically what scholarship you're talking about, or what the prompt is, though. Okay. How important is the SAT compared to GPA for international students transferring from college to Stanford? Um, Again, I'm gonna bring this a little bit broadly. If a school is applying for, if a school is requiring students to submit an SAT, then or an SAT, then it's gonna be important. They're gonna be looking at it. I would say, um, if it's optional and your testing isn't great, but your GPA as a college, as a college student is good, then that's going to be a good thing, right? Like, having a good GPA as a transferring student is important. Like, it's going to be key for you to be able to land at a place that you want if you're leaving your school. But again, I think oftentimes there's this idea that certain parts of the application are weighed more than others, or more important, and that's not the case. Like, they all fit into how an application is evaluated. So all components are going to be important. But really it's more about, like, what is the story behind it. So if you have, let's say your GPA is a little bit more modest, but if there's reasons for that, like maybe you had issues adjusting or health issues, but you performed really well on an SAT or ACT, then that's a way to showcase that maybe the situation that led to your GPA does not reflect, your academic preparation or your ability to, you know, critically analyze things, right? Or solve problems, which is reflected by the testing. Um, let's say if you did really well in you have a really good GPA, really high grades across your subjects, but you just didn't have test prep for the SAT or ACT, or you didn't have time, or it was a last minute decision, or there's some sort of scheduling issues, so you had to sign up last minute. Like, all those things are things that you want to explain. Um, again, I'm not going to tell you, oh, you're going to get in even if you don't have a good SAT. Like, I'm not gonna tell you that. First of all, I don't know. Is it possible? Yes. But all points of the application are gonna matter. So what I would say is, again, if you are a ways away from transferring, if you can apply in the next year, I would give yourself time to strengthen your application as much as possible. Ultimately, wherever you're gonna be applying, again, whether it's Stanford or any other institution, you're gonna give yourself the best shot when you have the strongest application possible that you submit and you craft and put together, thoughtfully, right? And this applies for transfer or undergraduate. The way that you're gonna have the best application possible is, one, giving yourself time to prepare, being thoughtful in your college choices that you're applying to, being thoughtful about how you spend your time with your activities, being focused on the ones that you really care about, trying to figure out how you can have more of an impact to elevate your engagement in each of those activities, and then starting your essays early and being thoughtful about what you want to say about yourself, about showing how your intellectual mind, the way that you think about things, whether it's about the world, about service, about your values, about your potential various academic interests, and then putting that together and reiterating. The first version of your essays is probably not going to be the one that you submit. It's going to take several revisions. And so I'll leave you with that as we start to wrap up. Thank you all for participating. I'm going to just show you here quickly to wrap up, um, a couple of next steps if you are interested. So first of all, if you do want to get custom coaching, or if you have questions that I didn't get to answer or that came up for you, you're able to book a free 15-minute intro call with me. You can use that to ask any other questions. No expectations for anything beyond that. But if you do want to move forward and get additional support, we can also talk about what those needs of yours are. Also, Leland is having a special where they're offering 10% off of any Leland gift cards. So if you go to that link right here of joinleland.com and gift cards, you're able to buy that, and whether that's something you want to give to somebody else or just use it for yourself, that's how you're able to get 10% off. To match that, I'm also offering an additional 10% off any services with me, and that's until December 7th. But if you want to, you should be able to combine both of these. If you want to, just go ahead and book services by the end of today. Otherwise, it will still be available up through next week. Different ways that I support students. For those of you who might be needing last minute support for upcoming regular decision deadlines, I'm happy to construct a micro package for you or a session bundle to help you get that last minute targeted support, whether to cross your essays, about getting reviews on your activities list, or looking at your application as a whole. Those are mostly through like sessions, either synchronously or asynchronously. I can also just take a final look at your application and give you my feedback. It's all written, usually, 3 to 5 pages, sometimes more, on how an AO would review your application, what is coming through, what suggestions I might have for you. Oftentimes I've had students who prefer that just because I can take that kind of holistic approach. And then finally, if you are someone who just needs a lot more help, or you're looking to apply in the next year or two, we can work on a classic coaching package that is more traditional, longer term, to help you work on that aspect of developing your profile, being thoughtful about your activities, and eventually supporting you on your application once you get to that point. Just some final reminders. So this recording will be available on YouTube for 1 week. Afterward, it'll be available on Leland Plus, which you can access via a free trial. I'm going to follow up with a survey. It'd be super helpful to me if you are able to fill that out, just to tell me, what worked about the session, what would you adjust for future events. It lets me know what's working, what to offer in the future. And then just remember that discount code expires on Saturday. I'm also going to follow up with a message with the code again in case you didn't grab it. All right, thank you everyone for taking time out of your Saturday to join me. I hope you found this session helpful, and we got to answer a lot of your key questions. I'm hoping to offer more of these sessions in the future. But again, fill out the survey to let me know if that's something helpful for you, because it lets me know whether it makes sense to do that or not. All right, have a great day, everyone.